Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, Cesar Espino. Hello there and welcome back. It is your friend Cesar Espino, and you can find me at www.cesarrespino.com. And welcome to You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. Today I have a special guest. His name is Joel Oleson. Hey, Joel, how are you?
Hey, it's great to be there.
Great.
To meet you.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for being here. And before we dive in, I just want to give everybody a little bit of your background on who you are, and then we can get to your story.
Sure.
So Joel spent a decade in Microsoft in both the technology and marketing departments, developing a deep passion for technology, travel, and social interaction. He is a top technology influencer and Microsoft MVP and RD, a writer, speaker, and an influencer. He has 2 countries remaining outside of Africa in his quest to visit every country with only a handful of countries left. He enjoys building a network of technology professionals, inspiring travelers, and wants to share, connect, and uplift. Wow, that's amazing. So I definitely want to know about your quest of literally visiting every single country, and I think that's amazing. Before we get there, though, I want to know more about, where were you born? What is your background growing up as a kid?
Sure. So I was born in the Bay Area, Fremont, California.
Oh, you're not too far from me then.
When I was 5, my dad sold his place and we moved to southern Idaho. Totally different contrast.
Oh, wow. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I grew up in Burley, Idaho, went to school in Declo, Idaho, a school with 60 in my graduating class.
Oh,
and
wow.
There were probably a dozen of those kids who I went to kindergarten with that I graduated with. Very small town. Everybody knows everybody.
Wow. That's definitely a pretty big radical change if you ask me. I mean, I'm in SoCal in Los Angeles, and just moving from here to, Idaho or places like that, I would be like, that's definitely a big change, right?
Yeah. And talk about family life. It was kind of like the Brady Bunch, 3 brothers, 3 sisters. I'm number 5. So big family. And my dad wasn't a farmer. He was actually a social worker. But we had a couple of acres, big garden with lots of fruit trees. It was a fun place to grow up. Lots of good family values. But I live in Southern California now, in Oceanside, actually.
Got you. No, yeah, you had to come back this way, huh? That's awesome.
Right. Yeah.
And so, and then in terms of as you were growing up, were there any things that you said, I want to be this type of person when I grow up, or what was your idea, growing up in terms of who you wanted to become?
It's funny. My dad was a social worker, and I wanted to help people.
Okay.
So my passion was, I wanted to learn how to teach. I really wanted to learn how to interact with people and kind of learn how to be an influencer, I guess you could say. Like, I wanted to be able to help people. And as well, when I was young, travel was a big passion of mine. But as well, I had this knack for technology. Like, even in grade school, my teachers would say, hey, can you help me out with the computer? Because they just knew it just came naturally to me. They'd get a brand new program and the UI was just intuitive. Like, it just made sense.
Got it. So is that something that you wanted to do, kind of get into technology, helping people? That was kind of the inspiring aspect of you growing up?
It's funny. You think that it's like I was really into psychology actually. So
Okay.
I was like, I just want to understand people. I want to be able to help people with their problems. But what's funny is I kind of went through this path of when I went to college, it was focused on psychology and counseling. And then halfway through, I realized, man, you got to have a PhD to really do much with this, or else
Yeah.
I'll end up in a hospital. And I didn't like the idea of working in a hospital. I hate needles.
Yeah.
My brother, he broke his arm, and I was in the waiting
ER.
room, and
Yeah.
the doctor comes in and fixes his arm, and I about passed out. I'm like,
Oh,
this is
wow.
not
Yeah,
for
that's not for
me.
you.
Not for me.
Wow. And so growing up, were there any that you see? I think a lot of people, even if you grew up with in a very good, stable family and, having everything as a kid, I know sometimes we have things that go in our heads or obstacles or challenges that even, you don't even see it from the surface, right? From the outside, it seems like everything's fine. For you, was there anything that you can say you went through that you had to more or less overcome, or some obstacles that you faced that you had to overcome?
Absolutely. So, kindergarten, first grade, I was picked on a lot.
Mm.
My ears don't look big now, maybe, but when I was a little kid, I just had massive ears, and I was called Dumbo and Mickey Mouse. The freckles don't show up so well, but I think you can tell from the hair color. I
Yeah.
had tons of freckles, like my face was just filled with freckles. I was a freckly kid, and you can see the hair
Yeah.
color.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit lucky that I still got some. My older brother lost his,
Yeah.
but man, like, red hair makes you stand out, freckles makes you stand out, big ears makes you stand out, and I was just a target,
Yeah.
on the school bus, and here as well. Here I'm moving from California, so I wasn't everybody. Like I said, everybody knew everybody. So those early years, it was tough. Like,
Yeah.
people didn't want to talk to me, be my friend or whatever. And I wasn't very athletic. I
Mm.
didn't have any, not very coordinated as a kid.
Yeah.
And I was actually this skinny, really tall kid who they assumed was a basketball player.
But it
Every
wasn't.
year I tried out for basketball, never made it. Didn't matter that I was 6 foot. It's like they figured, oh, it'd be easy for you to join the basketball team. No,
Right. Yeah.
no skills.
Yeah, yeah. So growing up, kind of going through that, like as a kid, how do you overcome that, or what are some things that now looking back is like the things you did that maybe are even applicable to today's, time, where maybe some of the things you did then, helped you continue to push forward? Because a lot of times, right, we have
Absolutely.
obstacles and we have these things, and they help us continue to move to the next level. So what were some things that you might have done,
So
or
let me explain it this way. Like,
Mhm.
a lot of the teachers in elementary school, especially, they would say he doesn't apply himself. He has all this potential, but doesn't apply himself. And it was consistently year after year of I'm so bright, I have this talent, I have these abilities, but I remember in fourth grade, it's like I had a teacher who's like, he kept telling me to sit down, sit down, sit down. I just had so much energy. And now, from where I sit now and look back, I had some really bad ADD. I had some really bad ADHD. Um, and even now, it's like I've learned techniques to kind of deal with it. But I wasn't an straight A student. I was getting B's and C's, and even like seventh, eighth grade, I was struggling to get a C sometimes. And it seemed much easier for my older brothers and sisters,
Mhm.
but my ability to focus, and it was tough. Um, and I did learn some techniques around using computers, actually.
Mm.
Um, I took, when I was at college, I was, I did get into a community college, this college in Idaho, and started really kind of focusing, which is difficult for somebody here with ADD.
Yeah.
And I was never really diagnosed. My parents never really took me anywhere. I was kind of just skating by, and I knew that I wanted to go far, so I kind of pushed myself. But
Yeah.
it was this ability to use computers as a tool to be able to, do quizzes and being able to use the interface to like work on English. So I had this English on computers class where I would write my stories and even the testing and so on. For some reason, when the test was on computers, I would do so much better. I don't know. So it's like this, it just made it much more intuitive, and my ability to learn the quizzes and learn the information was just so much easier from that perspective.
Yeah. What do you think is one thing that helped you continue to push forward, right? And just continue to excel and say, you know what, I just gotta keep pushing through, even, through any possible challenges you were going through.
Well, a lot of people, they think, oh, well, people have this idea of what they want to do. They say, oh, well, you're a traveler, Joel, or oh, Joel, you're really into technology. I didn't know that it was technology was going to be my future. I knew I was good at it, but I was not a tinkerer. I'm not good with like things. And even like in college, I would look at the computer schedule and you're a programmer or you're a network admin. And there was none of this like project manager or technical marketing or social media marketing. These things didn't exist. But when I was in college, I took this one class where it required me to learn about the internet. And man, I fell in love with the internet. And as well, around the same time, I was taking this economics class. And in the econ class, there was a project where it's like, come up with a business idea. And so I came up with this business idea with what I was learning about the internet, and was like, pizza. People should be able to buy pizza on the internet, because when you're playing games, you can't.
That's a good point.
It was sitting on your dial-up, so you couldn't use your phone when you're playing games. So I was like, all right, pizzatoyou.com. And this was way back in 96, where the internet was young.
Yeah.
And I came up with this pizzatoyou.com and built a prototype for this project. And I was like, I should do this. Like, this is good stuff. And I was doing student teaching at the time. And the student teacher that I was working with, he's like, you're so good at computers. Why don't you do that? And I was like, maybe, but I want to be a psychologist. I want to be a counselor. I want to help people.
Yeah.
But it's funny how things work out.
Yeah, definitely. And now even landing a job with Microsoft or a company such as Microsoft, I mean, that's huge in my opinion, right? I think a lot of people specifically that want to get into or were working or studying the technology or computers or any of that stuff, they wanted to either go to Apple or Microsoft or IBM, some of those companies. And so was that easy to even get into that? And how did you even land that job there with them?
It was tough in the beginning. Let me tell you, these things are not, you don't fall into these. It does take effort. It does take a plan. I started with this teaching kids computers thing called Future Kids. And then I gained some rapport with the guy who owned the company, who says, hey, I've got a network lab. Can you help me fix these computers? And so I started doing some of that. And at college, while I was there, I got this job as a dispatcher. So I wasn't the one fixing the people's computers, but I was the one they would call, and I would log the problem ticket. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think that support is a good place to start, where you're actually hearing the problems, you're hearing the solutions. And what was great was I started answering some of the problems on the phone. The faculty would call up, say, I've got this problem, and I would be able to resolve it.
Yeah.
And so through some of that experience, I was then able to get a job at the lab at the school. So I was now maintaining the computers. So now I'm building my resume, and I posted my resume, when I graduated. So now I've got a degree, so I've got the paperwork, and I've got some experience. And there was a company up in Seattle. This was back in the alt.jobs.wanted, alt group, news groups.
Yeah.
I had posted my resume. In fact, I kind of spammed it a little bit, trying to get it into I was like, I don't care where it is. So I was pushing it in all these different cities, jobs wanted for resumes. And I got this contact up in Seattle who said, hey, if you lived here, we'd give you a chance. I'm like, and I was in Utah at the time. I'm like, hey, you know what? I'll roll the dice. I'll go for it. And so I jumped in the car, drove 14 hours up to Seattle. Wow. Next morning, did the interview, and he's like, yeah, I'd take a chance. In fact, he says to me, he's like, we'll put you on 1 month probation. And I didn't happen to tell my wife that. I just told her, hey, we're moving to Seattle.
Oh, wow.
And just, it takes a leap of faith sometimes. And it was a year later, after working for that startup in Seattle, that, things got kind of crazy. But I learned so much. I learned Oracle and web servers and a little bit of programming. So that's such that when there was a support job that opened up at Microsoft for Slate.com, mm-hmm. I was able to land the job. And I mean, I passed the interview, which is the toughest part. And I got on as a contractor. So I was a contractor at Microsoft. And a few years later, I would come back as a full-time employee working on a product that would soon be called SharePoint, as the first employee in IT working on full-time as an IT admin for SharePoint.
Right. That's amazing. I mean, it comes down to anything you do, right? It comes down to just being persistent and just kind of following that idea, that passion, and taking the punches throughout the journey, right? And that's kind of what you did.
Absolutely.
And I know definitely if you're in IT or people that want to do that, they can appreciate it. I have an IT background. One of my dreams was to either go work for either IBM or Microsoft. And at that time, it was like not what I knew, who I knew, and I didn't make it to that level because then I got redirected right into a different journey, and it happens a lot. But that was my passion, and it comes down to that though. It's just being persistent and pushing through, and taking that leap of faith though. That was like very risky, right? And what is your feedback on that? Because a lot of times people are afraid of that risk or afraid of taking the leap of faith. Or I always tell people, you allowed the fear to take away the opportunity. In this case, for you saw something bigger, and you didn't allow that fear to take away that opportunity. Yet people get hung up on that. So for you, not telling your wife and say, "Yay, we're moving to Seattle," not knowing if you're gonna have that job.
Yeah, I had faith it was gonna work out. In my mind, it was like, you know what? This is going to work out. I've got the job. And I'm not saying it was perfect. That first year I was there were times at that company where it was like, hey guys, we're not going to meet payroll this week. It might be delayed a week or two. As soon as this client pays us, then we can pay you. So it was tough. Some of those startups, there is risk in being in a startup, but man, I learned so much because as well in a startup, you're there's so much demands on you. And so I think when you're young, you got to take risks. It's calculated risks. For me, it was stay in Utah, keep doing future kids, it's like, teaching kids computers or whatever, or go for the big leagues, the minor leagues, go for the big leagues. Let me shoot for the sky, move to Seattle. I know that it was going to be higher expenses, but it's like, hey, we'll live in a tiny little apartment. My wife was pregnant. It was a tough time, but I'm like, I want this to work. And I had the faith that's like, I'm going to put in the effort. I think so much of what people don't realize, so much of it is not the skills. It's actually people skills. You building relationships with your colleagues, you building relationships with your manager, and navigating it. It's like your career, you can navigate it. But a lot of it is relationships. So much of it is like, the person who was making faith in me saying, hey, let's give this guy a chance. I obviously had to put the time and effort into learning the skills, but it was, it's a two-way relationship, making sure that they see progress, they see I'm learning, and they took a chance.
Yeah, and in that case, someone took a chance on you, and so now you have to not only prove to them, but more so important, prove to yourself that you are going to be able to do this and overcome that, right? And
absolutely.
I love the fact that you said, you were certain, you had faith that it was going to work out, and it begins with that thought in mind. It begins with the idea that you are going to do it, and not even doubt yourself. And that's like in many things in life. It's like, if you want something so bad, just go out and get it. I think Les Brown talked about it in that sense. And so it's pretty amazing. The other thing too is I believe that anything we do is risky. Eating a hamburger is risky because then it has consequences. So like, it doesn't matter what we do. I think everything's risky. It's just like you said, it has to be calculated risk. You need to know what kind of risk you're getting yourself involved with, and then making that decision based on that. But everything we do, in my opinion, is risky. So let's talk about your traveling adventures. Like that is amazing. What came to mind, or when did you get the idea of, I want to visit every country, as part of my journey? Like, when did that come to, and how did that come about?
Yeah, so it obviously, you don't start with that. You start with, when I was a kid, it's like I dreamed of living in Scotland. I dreamed of being able to see the world. But it was actually a trip. When I was at Microsoft, first year in IT, my boss's boss comes into my office and says, "Hey, you have a passport?" I'm like, "No, but I can get one." Mm-hmm. And he says, "Well, there's an IT conference coming up in Europe, and you're the only one who knows this product called SharePoint." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna get my passport. I'll do it." And my boss was actually really upset. He's like, "I've worked in this company for 8 years, and I've never been able to travel with the company. And here it is. You've been here for like nearly, 8 months, a year, whatever." And he's like, "And you're traveling all the way to Paris? Like, that's a dream."
Yeah.
So I do this trip to Paris. I'm trying to like do it right. This was like one of my first traveling with a company.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. Like, I was able to get out in Paris and spend a day across the city. We were locked up in the chateau in the countryside where the conference was. And I was like, it was a dream for me. It was like, this is so amazing. And because I did it, I knew it was possible. And I figured out how much it cost me for the flight, and it really wasn't that bad. Figured out, how much hotels were. And I'm thinking, it was so fulfilling for me. I'm like, I need to be doing this in my life. I need to do this every year. So at that point, it was, I need to do a new country, a new place every year. Like, it was so fulfilling to me to do this. And it was then after doing that, like, and I put in the effort to become a speaker. I want to be able to speak at conferences. So there was networking, to be able to find who was running these conferences, finding other experts, becoming really an expert at my trade so that I could get into these. Because a lot of these conferences, they would pay for your flight and hotel. So a few years later, as an example, just a few years later, I'm in Barcelona, and I invite my wife and kids to come with me. They stay at the hotel that's covered, so only I have to pay incrementally for them. And I knew how much I paid for my ticket, so it was, I kind of knew how I could plan to be able to do this epic family trip. They call it once in a lifetime.
Yeah.
But I've taken my family to Europe many times now. So
yeah.
And anyway, so I after about somewhere around 50, 60 countries, I'm like, I want to see every country in the world before I die. Mm-hmm. And then it was, you know what, I could actually see every country before I retire. Let me plan that. And now the goal has been, no, I don't even want to wait until I retire. I want to do them all before I turn 50.
Yeah.
Now, COVID-19 is kind of messing with that a little bit, but I still think it's possible.
Yeah, and that's amazing how the idea grew from just that one trip, and then how you started looking at it from a different perspective, right? I believe a lot of it is all with planning. And like you said, you plan, okay, well, how much is the flight? How much is the hotel? How much is this? And then once you start understanding the dynamics of that, then you can put forward a game plan, which you've done. And I call it, you're chunking it down. You're looking at the big picture, and you're chunking that down, creating smaller tasks to get you close to that objective, right?
That's right.
And that's, would you say that that's pretty much almost the same as planning other things in your life? Yet because we see that as pleasure, we tend to forget about some of the critical elements that could also be utilized when planning things to that effect.
Absolutely. And even like that idea of I brought my family. Well, part of it was it's quite selfish if I'm spending all this money on travel. That's the family money. So there's a few things I adjusted in my life where it's like, for my income that I make in my daily work, that pays the bills, I'm not going to use that money on travel. I started using it as incentive that I'm only going to spend the money that I get from my blog or that I get from my speaking that will pay that. And as well, even with my travels, I would get frequent flyer miles, and it's like, well, let me use my frequent flyer miles to get the family to travel on some of these. Then it won't bother them so much that
Right.
dad's gone, in Mongolia or whatever.
Yeah.
They can understand it's like, hey, well, we're going to do that safari trip in Africa next year. Let's focus on that.
Right.
And it's finding the balance in your life. Part of my goal as well is I don't want to be divorced. I don't want to get divorced and then achieve my goal. That's a failure in my mind. I want balance. I want family life as well as a good career. I want, if I'm gone all the times too, like if my boss is like, hey, where is he? He's always gone. That doesn't work either. So I have to keep the right balance with work and family and career to balance out something that today has been kind of more of a hobby. It's obviously turned more than that for me. It's a passion. It's a huge passion of mine.
Right. What would you say are some of the lessons that you've learned through going to some of these other countries, right? I believe that, we're not in one of the best and maybe greatest country that there is with different technology, access, different things, right? And some of the countries don't have those, possibilities. Yet I also find that they tend to be sometimes even more happy. That people tend to find happiness within that, or at least that's what I see in some other countries, right?
Absolutely.
What have been some of the lessons you've learned, or some things that you've discovered?
So let me start with Iran. A lot of people would never dream of traveling to Iran, but hey, I'm going to go to every country. So
yeah.
And the more research you do on Persia and the empire and the history, the more you look into Iran, wow, one of the coolest places in the world to visit. So I got really amped up on doing research and understanding it. First time I tried to go there was no embassy, no consulate, no way to get a visa. And I had a friend who I'd met in Dubai who was living in Iran. He's like, hey, just get a ticket. We'll show up and I'll plead your case. And he got this, he got the ministry to give me an invitation even. So we get to the border. I fly into Iran through Qatar, incredible trip. We get there and it's basically knocking on the door. Hey, Tehran, let us in. And he's like, American? Not possible. So now I'm being sent back, not in handcuffs, but I kind of felt like it. They kept my passport as I got sent back to security in Dubai. And I'm like freaking out, like, here I am trying to visit a country that seems like it's impossible, and now I'm stuck in security. I'm like, this is going to mess up my future travels.
Yeah.
And it was a nightmare. They kept interrogating me. Why are you trying to go to Iran? I'm like, hey, I'm just a tourist. I just want to see the place. Yeah. Eventually, it's interesting. A few years later, the U.S. gets a little bit better relationship where you could go to the Pakistani embassy and get a visa. So I lined up a trip to go to Iran. I get there, and you talk about challenges to overcome, or you talk about lessons learned. I'm meeting the people of Iran, and I had no idea what to expect. Are they going to hate me because I'm American? Like, that's what we think. But no, people were so nice. Beautiful, beautiful country. And yes, I did see, like, on the sidewalk, there's the Star of David, and there's over by the police station, there's like Death to America or whatever. Yeah. But I'm meeting these guys on a park bench, and he's like, where are you guys from? Oh, we're from America. He's like, why do you hate us? I was like, I don't hate you. What are you talking about? And so we had this really good conversation where he's like, no, your country hates us. And I'm like, we don't hate you. I'm sorry that, it's like there's this government level where it's like governments don't get along, but at a personal level, you find out that we don't need to be afraid of who we are. And especially when we travel, it really opens doors and it builds relationships, like being able to understand people's perceptions and understanding things. And let me just tell you another quick one.
Yeah.
I'm in, the first time I went to the Middle East, I go to Jordan, and I met with these guys in Jordan who, in the technology community, they were taking me around. We were going to Petra, and I found out they were Palestinian. And as an American, like growing up, I learned the Palestinians are brainwashed. They're crazy people. They, just don't see things straight. And here I'm with two Palestinians and me in a car out in the middle of nowhere. And I'm thinking, what? I'm kind of afraid, because these were the people that I thought were like, this is Al Qaeda almost, like,
right, yeah.
So I'm asking these guys, and they're telling me their story about how their families were kicked out of Jerusalem, and they know exactly where their homes were. They haven't been able to return, and they've been living in Jordan as these refugees. And I learned a lot of empathy and trying to understand their story. And it was interesting as well. When I was going from Jordan, I had an Israeli guy who was going to be picking me up at the border. So I've got a Palestinian handing me over to an Israeli. And I ended up spending a couple days with this Israeli family. And I'm staying with them, and they're talking about how their home has these extra reinforcements in it because of the Palestinians who try and bomb them.
Wow.
So it was interesting to see kind of both sides of this story, and to understand these guys are like, we don't hate the Palestinians, but we have to defend ourselves against those who don't want us to live.
Yeah.
And over the course of that trip, I met a number of different Palestinians and went to the West Bank, even spent some time with them to kind of understand there's a lot of different perspectives, and we can't make assumptions. These, hey, just nuke them, this kind of thing is like so wrong.
Yeah, right.
In fact, I think in my travels, remember the big tsunami that wiped out a lot of Southern Asia. When that happened, I started thinking, like, I know people there, and it makes it much, much more personal.
Wow.
Like,
yeah.
When it's like, hey, something's happening on the other side of the world, it's very easy to be like, that's too bad for them, but it doesn't sink in. But when you know somebody, or when you've been there, it makes it so much more personal.
Yeah, definitely. Is there, in your opinion, has your perception changed of life and appreciating life now that you've seen, all these different countries? Has that changed your point of view of life and in general?
Yeah. I think in America, we learned that there's this like Republican and Democrat. And so we really have in our minds that there's two perspectives. But when you go to 100 countries, you learn that there's not two perspectives. There's hundreds of perspectives. You learn that there's so much nuance in this world. It's like, you think about peace in the Middle East, you think one's right and one's wrong. And it's like, no, that's not the case. There are so many variables, so many nuances. And the more you travel, the more experiences you have, the more you realize there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to be able to kind of, you got to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And I absolutely believe that travel is one of those things that cures bigotry. It cures prejudice, because when you can, I'm traveling across Western Africa, and these guys are calling me white man. It's like you have to be a minority to understand what it's like for the minority. And if you only live in your little area where you're surrounded by people who think like you do, who look like you do, your perspective is going to actually be small and shallow, and you're going to live a shallow life. And I've had people say, hey, I can't afford to travel. Guess what? Everybody can afford to travel. You can't afford not to. And I'm not talking about you need to go to every country in the world. I understand that's a big dream. That's a big goal. It's meant a lot to me, but that doesn't mean you can't get outside your city and go see a new place and meet a new group of people and spend time with people outside of your community.
Right. Yeah. I read something, I forget exactly how it goes. It said, I'd rather die with dreams than die with a goal or a vision or something to that extent, which pretty much it is related to travel. And a lot of people say they have that wish. I want to go here, I want to go there, and all this stuff, right? And something happens, you die, and then it was just a wish, right? And so the idea is rather die with dreams, die with the fact that you actually did it, that you went
try to accomplish
right?
it.
Yeah. So I saw that, and I kind of definitely enjoy that. And yeah, I mean, I think when you step out of your comfort or the place you're living, and you see other cultures, and you find the different ways of people, how they live, and things to that nature, I believe that it definitely puts a different aspect in your own life and how you see life and how you go about it, right? And so I definitely love to see different cultures and see that and be able to learn from that, because there's always a learning experience there, right? You tend to appreciate life differently. You tend to see things differently. Like you said, I feel like it's maybe a lot of times it's just like one kind. We're all one human kind. Yeah. And there's so many things that are, I guess, trying to separate us from that. And it can be partly the government or whatever the case may be. It brings us into a different aspect. What is one of the craziest things you've done in your travel?
Oh, man. Craziest. So, I eat a lot of strange things.
Okay.
One of the other things is I love to, I want to embed myself in a tribal culture. So one of the craziest things was friend of a friend on Facebook lived in Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. And I connected and became friends with him. I then asked this guy, hey, I want to go spend time in a tribe in Papua New Guinea. And he says, you know what? I come from a tribe in the hills, a hill tribe. So I can help you arrange to go visit this hill tribe. So I, talking about crazy things, I said, okay, I'm going to fly to this town up in the hills, Mount Hagen, and his brother picked me up at the airport. And in full trust, basically jumped in the van with these guys and went out to this tribe, not knowing much about this, just kind of like just jumping in both feet first. And here I am in this tribe in Papua New Guinea up in the hills where I lived for a week with this tribe. We're talking mud huts. They still use bow and arrow. There's tribal warfare in that area. In fact, in the few days that I was there, we went to a funeral where we put mud all over our bodies, going to the funeral. I put like leaves and so on ourselves. And so there was a crazy funeral we went to. We went to one of the tribes nearby. Everywhere we went, they would have like a group of 6 to 10 people with us just to protect us from other warring tribes nearby. It was totally nuts.
Wow.
But yeah, stayed in the mud hut with a family there. The cat woke us up in the middle of the night. But you're basically in a mud hut, dirt floor, sleeping with this family who the mother's stoking the fire in the middle of the night. It was incredible.
One thing that came to mind, and even with that, again, you just jumped into that with your 2 feet, with not even knowing a whole lot of details. I hear sometimes people saying that they want to travel and they're like, but I'm afraid, because all the crime and all the things that are going on and whatever the case may be. And I know that maybe perhaps there's some of that. I'm of the belief that it's all the energy. If you're positive and you're not even thinking about that, you're not going to attract that. You're definitely a better person that can answer that than I can. Yet, what would you say to someone that might say, I want to travel, yet they start thinking about the negativity, the possible crimes. So
Yeah.
the fear, right? You obviously been in so many different places. What would be your advice to that?
I think that there's a trust culture in social media where it's like the couch surfing. You think about couch surfing, this idea that there's people, in fact, this is a great one in Algeria. I did an Airbnb in Algeria that had no reviews.
Airbnb, okay. Wow.
Yeah, you think that's kind of crazy.
Like, I didn't think they would have that over there, but okay, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, that was the thing. He's like, I can't accept payments through Airbnb because they don't accept it in Algeria. And we're trying to find someplace to stay, and we're staying in this like very remote, walled, ancient village with this strange religion where it's like a break off of the Muslim faith, where the women, they put a sheet over their you can't see them, and they just show one eye.
Wow.
Yeah, in Gardaya, way out in the middle of nowhere in Algeria. And this guy picks us up at the airport, and it was his wedding the night before. It was a crazy situation, but this idea of now we've got a local connection, and he's able to kind of help us, give us a tour, connect with people. It's like there's things that can go wrong, but you just have to keep an eye open for that. But it's like trust but verify. Gotcha. There's a lot of people, there's so many good people in the world who want to help. There's people, in fact, you see these people who are like, oh, I'm gonna hitchhike from across the world, or I'm gonna not spend any money and I'm gonna travel all these places. People, there's good people and bad people for sure, and there's people who want to take advantage of you. But the more you travel, the more you're able to kind of spot those kind of bad situations.
Yeah.
And I have been in them as well. Like there was once I was in Istanbul, and it was my buddy's birthday party, and we went to this bar, and there's these dancing Ukrainian girls, and they come and sit down next to him, and they're basically giving him, they're having him buy their drinks, and he's thinking, oh, what, $4 or $5 for a drink or something. We get the bill, and it's 1,000 euros. Yeah, like more than $1,000.
Yeah, like
and and before they even showed us the bill, he's like, "Hey, can we split this?" And it was a sham. The whole thing was like this guy who was trying to pretend to be our friend, and I ended up having to they wouldn't accept my card wasn't even working for the amount. I had no idea what amount they were trying to charge on it, but it was being declined. I actually ended up running into the streets. Like it was crazy.
Wow. Yeah, that's wow.
No, so there's good and bad experiences, right. but absolutely, I think it's one of those things where you do have to take a leap of faith sometimes. And you don't have to travel alone. There's a lot of people who are out traveling, and there's meetup groups as an example of people that are looking for people to travel with.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. How do you choose what place you're going to go to next, or how do you do your selection?
I'm very interested in amazing experiences. So interesting experiences, things that I've like as an example, my last trip, I actually went to Syria of all places. Mm-hmm. And on that trip, I also went to Saudi, as well as Göbekli Tepe. For those of you who don't know, like Göbekli Tepe is one of the oldest places in the world for civilization. These old stones with carvings on them, and I was really, really interested to see that area. And then when I got there, I'm doing more research, and it's like there's in the Muslim tradition, there's some places where Abraham had been. And Job the prophet, and as well there's like some really, really ancient stuff in that area, but as well going out at night and dancing with the people and trying the different foods, soaking up the culture. For me, it's it's wonders of the world and beyond. It's the natural wonders of the world, it's the man-made wonders of the world. So I just want to I want to be an archaeologist. I want to be able to just kind of soak up the stuff. Like, I love Egypt. So much to see, so much to do, and just soak it up. It's awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. Joel, before I let you go, I can go on and on this topic because I really love it. And I know you have so much information, so many different adventures that you can definitely share. Unfortunately, we don't have the, more time to continue. But if people want to connect with you, where can they connect with you?
So let me first mention my travel blog, which is travelingepic.com. That's traveling EPIC, like traveling epic, and then it is epicadventures.com. And my tech blog is collabshow.com. I've done a YouTube series recently during the COVID stuff where I'm taking some of my best videos. Like, I've got this baby penguin video where it's pecking my eyes and jumps on my face and on my chest. So I've got a lot of, I've got these crazy YouTube videos from my travels that I'd love to share with everybody.
Nice.
And that's just youtube.com/my name, Joel Oleson, with an E in the sun, Oleson.
Yep.
But yeah, I'd love to connect with everybody and share more stories.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll definitely have all of the your contact information on the comments so people can actually see that and also connect with that. I have two more questions for you. The first one is, if you were to give one advice to our listeners and viewers of what they can do today to overcome anything in their life, what would that be?
I think that the first thing, I'll give you two. The first thing is really believing in yourself. Like, if you don't believe you can do it, you're not going to be able to do it. So it absolutely is a mindset. So I think you need to kind of deconstruct it, come up with a plan. You have to have a vision for it. If you don't think you can, you can't. So it obviously starts with figuring it out. And I think the second thing is dreaming. Like, you need to have a destination in mind. I've got a kid who struggles with, doesn't know what he wants to do with his future. And it's like you there's that saying, you shoot for the stars and you might hit the moon. Mm-hmm. But if you're not shooting at all, you're afraid to pull the trigger, you're not going to go anywhere.
Right.
So I absolutely think that it's important to dream. It's important to have a vision. You gotta understand, the more you understand yourself, the better you're going to be able to overcome obstacles.
Yeah, no, I love that. Definitely believing and dreaming, and those are actually two very good good things that we can apply on our day-to-day lives. The last thing is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience before I let you go? Yeah.
So absolutely, I want to encourage people to be dreaming during this time. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of rough things in the news, and I understand we tap into the news to kind of keep informed. It's okay to unplug. It's okay to step away. Absolutely be dreaming. This thing is not going to last forever. So I absolutely want the listeners out there to be thinking about, what would you like to be doing? What's that next big thing? Hey, you can be dreaming about that next big trip, or dreaming about that next opportunity, or how you're going to change the ways. Absolutely, there's brighter days ahead. It gets better. That message of it gets better is so true. Just because you're stuck in the mud doesn't mean you're going to be stuck in the mud forever. It's going to harden, and you're going to be able to step right out of it. You might have to step out of your shoes. Things may change a little bit. You might feel uncomfortable with the mud between your toes, but you're going to get out of it, and your life's going to get better.
Yeah, I really love that analogy, and really is very relatable. And you're right. I mean, you just got to keep having faith and believing that things are going to get better. And even if you get hurt on the way, or get a couple of bruises or whatever the case may be, it's going to happen.
That's right.
So, again, Joel, thank you so much. I had such a great time being here with you today and listening to your story and really sharing all the things and adventures you've gone through. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome. And for the rest of you guys, please make sure you like, subscribe, check out Joel. Make sure you check out his YouTube channel. Look at the things that he's gone through. And please connect with him. And also leave a comment here. Share this video and comment in our platform. And please stay tuned for the next interview. Have a good day. Bye.
Hi, I'm Cesar Espino, real estate investor, business coach, and consultant, and author of the book, You Can Overcome Anything, Even When the World Says No. My number is 424-501-6046. In my book, I talk about making the necessary changes to shift your mind for prosperity and certainty. Pick up your copy at Amazon. I also love helping families with their real estate and can purchase your house fast and all cash. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. My number is 424-501-6046.
Thank you for having me today. I am so glad you tuned in to this podcast. You can find me at Spreaker.com, where you can like and subscribe. And to learn more about myself and my services, you can find me at www.cesarrespino.com, or you can also find me at Facebook under Cesar R. Espino. Once again, thanks for joining me. I am looking forward to having you at the next episode, and know that you truly can overcome anything.